Welcome, everyone. We're delighted to have participants from all parts of the globe watching this live or on the recorded fashion. Thank you for joining the Spiritism Talk series promoted by the United States Spiritist Federation every Saturday at 11 o'clock a.m. Eastern Time. Today, I am pleased to host this talk by Andreia Netto, who will be talking about Allan Kardec, a missionary of hope. And we all welcome Andreia warmly for this. But before she starts her presentation, allow me to tell you a little bit about her. On a personal note, I have realized Andreia is a key component of an international community of spiritists working to educate the non-Brazilian world through the translation of published works. And a bit more of her bio. She is currently the director of the Conscious Living Spiritist Group in Miami, Florida. They offer a weekly calendar of Spiritism activities in both Portuguese and English, including youth sessions. She is also director of events for the Spiritist Federation of Florida, which in April this year held its 14th conference. And she is managing director of Leal Publishing, which is an affiliated branch of Leal Livraria in Brazil. This is for the translation and dissemination of A, Divaldo Franco's many Spiritist books, and B, as FEB publisher for the dissemination of multiple authors and multiple Spiritist publications, again, in languages other than Portuguese. We invite you to take this opportunity throughout the presentation to send your questions using the chat window. Andreia has reserved time to address your comments and questions once she concludes her presentation. And with no further ado, Andreia.
Thank you so much, Mark, for that very warm welcome. And welcome everybody who may be listening right now, either live or recorded, as he stated. It is always an honor to participate in the program that is hosted by the United States Spiritist Federation every Saturday. We also congratulate everybody in the board of directors for the efforts and keep this going, all the activities and material that stays for others to watch, to reflect upon, and even perhaps send questions to the United States Spiritist Federation related to the topics that are presented every week. And I just wanted to say hi. I see Kirsten connected. She's a dear sister. And if you're on the chat, please be sure to say hello if you have any questions for later on today. And as Mark stated, our topic today is about Allan Kardec. It is October 18th, and every October we celebrate this very illustrious figure for the importance of compiling and bringing the Spiritist body of knowledge to life through his incomparable mission. And a lot of people hear about the name Allan Kardec, but they don't necessarily know a bit about the behind the scenes, what really came about to bring the promised consoler as promised by Christ. If you love me, keep my commandment, and I will send you the promised consoler, another consoler that would address all the questions that you've forgotten about or don't know about, more or less. In that sentence, perhaps the team can put this in the chat so we can really visualize what I'm trying to say. When Christ stated that he would send us another consoler that would stay with us for always. And Spiritism is the promised consoler. It is the third revelation, with having the first one, Moses, the second one, Christ, and Spiritism as the third promised consoler, the revelation. So I'm just bringing a little bit about this in case you're new to Spiritism and you hear about these things and you don't necessarily understand where we're coming about. And to do this, I want to invite you to go back in time And I just wanted to state that I used the book On the Way to the Light, which is by the Spirit Emmanuel, psychographed by the medium Chico Xavier, an amazing, amazing book that I invite you to read. Beautifully, beautifully written in bringing us a view on the history of our planet, of our humankind. Of course, Spiritism was mentioned, and Allan Kardec, and a little bit about what happened prior to Allan Kardec being born to undertake the task, the mission of compiling, of being the codifier of Spiritism. So let's go back in time. Emmanuel will narrate the time in which Napoleon Bonaparte, yeah, we're going to really go back in time, was called to the heights of power. And he's going to narrate to us that Napoleon Bonaparte, he was destined for a great task, as we know, in the social organization of the 19th century in France, but that he did not fully grasp the purpose of his great mission. He was really, really called upon to carry out this amazing mission, but he did not really realize what really was on the lines, if you will, because it took a lot of victories, as we know, but because of this, he allowed his vanity and his ambition to completely cloud his thoughts. As we're going to learn in Spiritism, pride, selfishness, ambition, these are all things that sometimes, if we are not very vigilant, really can toil something really great that we are doing. And beset by the dream of absolute domination, as it happened after some of the victories, Napoleon's activity barely reflected what was supposed to be the generous ideas that really led the French people towards the revolution. And his life, as Emmanuel was going to narrate, was full of shining and was also full of dark traits, showing his overall personality that varied between the forces of the good and the forces of the negative, the bad inclinations, if you will. And so he toiled between that. And because of his victories, he actually guaranteed the integrity of France itself. And that's very noble. That's very great. But he spread ruin and misery to other nations because his idea was full dominations. Just a little bit of history crash course here that Emmanuel brings us. And as he carried out the task, the civil code, as Emmanuel narrates, was organized, establishing the most wonderful formulas of laws, but he indulged in what Emmanuel is going to call the pillaging and scorning, the sacred emancipation of others with the movement of his armies and the absorption and the annexation of several other countries. So to the world, his soldiers' brow may have been lowered by glorious tradition, and he was in fact a missionary from the higher realms, but he was betrayed by his own strengths. And the world could not see that, of course. And this is where Allan Kardec comes in, because Bonaparte's act of invading other territories with his activities of transforming, of conquering, evading the purpose of this noble mission that he was called upon to reorganize the French people, compelled the spirit world to take matters into their own hands. And this is really amazing, because when we think about the world today and the things that we see happening, and we're not going to bring any countries or any politics, but it doesn't matter where we look at, there are issues. There are things happening. And often we wonder if the spirit plane is aware of what's happening, or if they've given up on us and said, you know what, let's focus on other planets out in the universe because Earth is lost. And that is not the case. There is not the case. There is something happening behind the chaos that we see. And so this is how it's important that we envision, because what was happening back in the 19th century was really what was allowing a time that was approaching when Jesus would send to the world, to a very much needed world of hope, of light, the consoler, in accordance with what he promised us. And so Emmanuel is going to say that ardent appeals were addressed to the divine master by the guardian spirits of Earth's nations. So let's pause for a second. In the spirit plane, benevolent spirits of high orders started making ardent appeals. They were praying so that Jesus would hear them, hear their appeal and say, hey, listen, we need help here. And so Emmanuel is going to state that numerous assemblies met in the spirit plane and the spheres closest to the earth. And one of the most lucid disciples of Christ descended to the planet, imbued with consoling mission. And 2 months before Napoleon made himself emperor, Allan Kardec was born. And this was on October 3rd of 1804, with the sacred mission of opening the way of Spiritism, the great voice of the consoler promised to the world by the mercy of Jesus Christ. And so much happened after the revolution, which I welcome you to read and find out about. But Allan Kardec, he wasn't born without his collaborators. Emmanuel is going to tell us that the 19th century bringing about a torment of enlightenment, the Enlightenment era, to the world, with every country making strides towards the progress, useful and very invaluable in invaluable forms, opening the way so that what Allan Kardec was about to bring was actually going to find soil in the hearts of people that would be touched by the Spiritist body of knowledge. And so he's going to say that the teachings, very sacred teachings of Spiritism, were basically on the verge of being heard by the suffering humankind. And in his magnanimity, in his greatness, in his profound love, Jesus would then break the sacred bread of hope and allow it to be fed to all of the hearts that were faithful. This is very beautiful, because when we consider the miracles of Christ breaking and multiplying the bread to the hungry back then, over 2,000 years ago, Emmanuel is going to say that he would break the bread of hope to the suffering hearts of humankind. And Spiritism was that bread. It was going to be divided. It was going to be promoted. It was going to be disseminated to many different hearts. And Allan Kardec, with his mission of hope, as we mentioned, enlightenment, of consolation, he would need to be accompanied by many collaborators in different areas, in philosophical area, in the scientific, because it would ask for reformative type of work that would manifest in different ways, allowing every area in the intellect and scientific activity of the 19th century to really blossom. And so there was this heavenly gift of interchange between the physical plane and the invisible plane, the spirit plane, which actually was reaching the planet in waves of indescribable enlightenment. I mean, if you consider how amazing the history of the world is, and how the spirit plane participates in it, we realize that things are really not as chaotic as we think, because they are in control. They are watching, they are seeing. And let's consider that Spiritism is very new. It's a very new revelation. I mean, 1857 was only 2 blocks away, if we speak symbolically, in the road of our planet. It's very new. And a lot of people question, I mean, how is it that Spiritism is really going to fulfill the promise of Christ as being the consoler of humankind, arriving to enlighten us and prepare our hearts so that the full wealth of heaven could partake in making the world a better place. Let's consider this. If Spiritism is so new, a lot of people are asking still about a 4th revelation. We haven't even grasped the 2nd yet, with Christ and his teachings. And Spiritism comes to fulfill the promise of explaining the things that we couldn't understand back then, because perhaps we were walking among Christ at that time, or teaches new things that we were not yet ready to understand, because we evolve, we progress, we grow in knowledge. And so, although we're still in our spiritual infancy, I think we are teenagers, because we are so very rebellious and we think we know all the answers. Spiritism is a very new body of knowledge that is waiting for us to really fully grasp its meaning and propagate it the best that we can. So here we are learning about Spiritism. We're talking about Allan Kardec, this missionary that was basically called upon to develop a very difficult and complex task of reorganizing what Emmanuel is going to use the word as the fallen edifice of faith and lead civilization back to the deep religious foundations, as in reconnecting us to God, religare, to connect once again. He wasn't talking about religious. There is a difference here. And it was really a complex task that Allan Kardec was given, because we are talking about being attentive to a mission of harmony, a mission of fraternity, not only in France, but of the Americas. And so the invisible plane working together, try to locate and try to manifest from the spirit place to the soils that were ready, the information of the spirit communication. And it found in the heart of New York. It found the soil ready to receive this knowledge about the interchange, about the reality of the spirit plane, starting with the consolation aspect of Spiritism, that life goes on, that we are immortal beings. It found its soil ready in New York, here in the United States, with the great phenomena of Hydesville. And a lot of us know about that in 1848. A lot of us may not know about it, so I invite you to read a little bit about how there was this famous town in New York called Hydesville that provoked a lot of different spectrum of opinions about what was happening. Could the rappings that were being heard, could the talking tables really bring messages from the beyond? And the sisters that were actually in the midst of it all, the Fox sisters. So really, I invite you to read about this. But it was that spark that originated here in the Americas that had an impact. And Emmanuel is going to say that it was then that it consolidated the victories of democracy. Europe sought to adopt these new and generous ideas found in the Americas. And so what happened was that it had a boom. And of course, Spiritism at the essence of this new conquest, because now we're going forward with Allan Kardec being inquisitive and curious about what was happening in France, which was a boom, a soar, a reflection of what was happening in Hydesville, wanting to understand what was that. And Spiritism would then be the essence of this new information, of this new conquest of understanding that there was an interchange between the two worlds, and trying to see how it could conduct hearts back to the gentle gospel of Christianity. Spiritism then came with this mission as well. So if we consider about how complex and difficult Allan Kardec's mission really was, we start appreciating the man even more, because it actually came to have the proof of the soul survival after death. And Spiritism came to try to rehabilitate the Christianity of the church that the church had actually distorted. So it was another view, trying to sowing once again, the eternal teachings of Christ in people's hearts. And this is still a task that is still very hard with Spiritism, because a lot of people, especially newcomers to Spiritism, have said that they felt disappointed in the way that different philosophies and different groups have tried to portray Jesus and his teachings and his love. And so with the truth of reincarnation, explaining the very absolute absurdity of absolute uncensored theories, worked to restore the true ways for human progress. Reincarnation, a key element also in the Spiritist teaching. And so Emmanuel is going to say, framing socialism within Christian postulate, it had no illusions concerning external reforms, and concluded that the only meaningful renewal was that of the inner self, the living core of social organism, down through time, striving for the intensification of the educational activities in the eternal light of the gospel of Christ, teaching us about the law of return, the law of cause of effect in the road of redemption, as well as the trials of the individual and the collectivity. Spiritism implemented the aspect of responsibility, when every spirit reincarnated had to enrich itself, had to seek the list of qualities. And so this idea of responsibility also is very strong in Spiritism, meaning I can no longer pinpoint a finger to fault others for things that may be happening. For we understand the great law of cause and effect. Everything that I do will have an effect. And so we start understanding the importance of trying to seek that inner reform with Spiritism, because the kingdom of heaven belongs to those that actually are able to work through the Beatitudes, and we start understanding what that means. Blessed are the afflicted, for they shall be consoled. What does it mean? The gospel, according to Spiritism, is going to explain that very well to us, making us see the world in a different way. And although it was a very painful time back then, it is still a very painful transition that we are going through, that we are facing right now. Spiritism would come to represent moral qualities that we are able to achieve through the efforts of our own work. We understand that we build the future that we want to live in, that can be found, that can be achieved through the efforts that we make individually and collectively as well. And so the promised consoler on its mission came to support the world, to give us the support that we need in a very tumultuous time. And so this is why the benevolent spirit, Bezerra de Menezes, would say that the spread of Spiritism is urgent, but it is not rushed. It is actually, it's urgent because it is going to address the affliction of the world. More and more people today are committing suicide. And this is something that Allan Kardec foresaw back then in posthumous works. He's going to work to write about how there would be an increasing number of even kids committing suicide. And this is what we are envisioning today. And so to break the idea of materialism so that the teachings of Spiritism can start making sense, can start having an impact. And although it's painful, and although it does not take away from what we must go through to break through the seeds, and it is as something that actually calls upon to make a struggle, to make an effort, and we feel like that tiny seed under the soil that needs to go through all that dirt to actually reach the light. Basically, that is the human soul. It is Spiritism that comes and provides to this soil of our human heart the necessary elements and conditions for us to flourish. And we cannot do that without it. We cannot do that alone. And so Emmanuel is going to tell us, teaching the law of return on the human's path of redemption. It is going to be through the most painful transitions. And so with the mission of Spiritism, it is in Spiritism's wellspring of enlightenment that humankind will be able to drink what Emmanuel is going to call the crystalline water of consoling truths of heaven, enabling souls to prepare for a new age. So we can't inherit the earth, this new age, without going through the process of transition. Planetary Transition is a book that we highly recommend the reading of by the medium Divaldo Franco and the spirit author Manuel Filomeno de Miranda, in which we start understanding a little bit more about the time of transition that we're going through. It is also found in the book Genesis, also in the 5 main works of Allan Kardec, Genesis, Miracles and Predictions According to Spiritism, in which we're talked about the time has arrived. also predictions from back then. So this is the time that we're going through. We cannot get to the other side without going through this phase of transition. And how blessed are we to be reincarnated at a time where we actually have what I always joke about, the VIP seats to this world of regeneration that is fast approaching, that we are being called upon to partake in. Here we are. It is in this moment that we start grasping Allan Kardec's importance for accepting the task of bringing us Spiritism. This is why we call him the missionary of hope, because that's exactly what Spiritism brings us. Hope for a new time, for a new world, for a new us, for a new me. I cannot do the inner reform if I don't know where to start. And of course, when we start studying Spiritism, is starting with the Spirit's book, with all of the questions that were compiled by Allan Kardec, we find how important the study continues, that is, of this book and the others that he brought us, is going to try to facilitate this understanding of whom we are, what we still need to work on, and yes, even grasp the qualities that we have already, that we brought from previous existences, because this is not the first time we've reincarnated, and it's certainly not going to be the last for a long time, because we're still in the category of imperfect beings, perfectible by the divine laws that we are all immersed in. It doesn't matter where we find ourselves in the universe. The laws are immutable, like the author himself, God, immutable. It is for all times. What changes is our perception and our understanding of them. And this is something that we also try to understand a little bit more. So in the book, the Legacy of Allan Kardec, not yet translated. It is a book that is brought by Leal Publisher and Leal Livraria in Brazil. O Legado Kardeciano, and I'm translating this for those that may be listening at home and would rather read it in Portuguese. Divaldo is going to tell us that it is said that while he was composing the book, especially after the Spirit's book came about and it was already being distributed, Allan Kardec had the idea of actually also creating the Parisian Spiritist Study Society, in which it was basically what we would call the very first Spiritist center. And so Divaldo is going to narrate to us how important also was Allan Kardec's idea and inspiration to create the Parisian Society, to give us an understanding that we would need a safe place to study about the Spiritist body of knowledge, a safe place in which we could study the communication of the spirits, because this is something that in every training class of mediumship, we talk about studying the message that mediums psychograph or channel through psychophony, meaning spoken messages. We need to be able to understand and discern between one message or the other, because they're brought from the spirits. And spirits in the spirit plane, discarnated, much like us, reincarnated, are of every type of different traits. And some of them are even those type of traits that come to betray us, to fool us, to joke with us, and others are of serious character in nature. Something also that Allan Kardec learned about as he dove into trying to understand what was happening with the tables that were talking back then. So the Parisian Society later on in 1858 came about, and it is actually, if we read its what do you call it? Statutes, if you will, if we read about what was supposed to be like, if we read the messages brought by St. Louis and other spirits that were telling us that the space was going to be also sacred, because it would allow human beings to interact with each other. The Spiritist Center does this very same thing. And oftentimes when we find ourselves in the Spiritist Center, we're going to find about the work that entails the dissemination of Spiritism, and that it is not easy. And this is why we also recommend the book, Paul and Stephen, to learn about how even the disciples had a hard time relating with each other. And so the Parisian Society is basically the example to be set of having a Spiritist center and how we are able to grow so much from the relationships that we develop through working at the Spiritist Center, through participating in the Spiritist Center, through partaking in the Spiritist movement. I mean, look at the work that the United States Spiritist Federation is basically doing with the symposium every year, visiting different states. Allan Kardec would do that. He would visit different centers through France with his own dime, by the way, to find out what they were doing, to find out about what they needed, to find out about their questions, to honor them through the articles that were also written on the Spiritist Review, the Spiritist magazine. A lot of people don't know about this, but through 1858 and 1869, there are in every year 12 editions. So think about this, the math of how much work Allan Kardec had. It wasn't just the 5 books and then Spiritism in its simplest expression. And what is Spiritism? There was so much more that people fail to realize. So the United States Spiritist Federation is actually trying to mirror with what Allan Kardec did when Allan Kardec traveled. And the United States Spiritist Federation invites us to do the same thing. Go to each other's Spiritist center. Visit each other without being called to be a speaker. We don't need to be invited to be a speaker to meet other Spiritist centers. We can just go. Let's go. Let's find out what they're doing. Let's learn from each other. And so when there is a General Assembly, for example, not only here in Florida, we have 2 General Assemblies. We invite centers, we invite more directors to participate to find out what is the Spiritist Federation of Florida doing, and the United Spiritist Federation does the very same thing now online to facilitate people so they don't have to travel when there is a General Assembly at a state, for example, that you don't live in. So yes, I am actually tooting the horn of the United States Spiritist Federation because the work is hard, but it is worth it. And Allan Kardec did it beautifully. He is the example. He is the role model for us to seek, to try to live by as Spiritist workers. And so when we read in the Spiritist Review or the Spiritist magazine, the experiences that he had in meeting different people and learning about the difficulties that they would have in their own center, in their own region, we find that history is actually repeating itself. The difficulties back then are the same today because we're talking about human nature. That's what we're talking about. We're looking here. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to answer the questions that are coming in automatically. I just don't want to lose momentum on what we're saying. But we're seeing here something is in Kardec foresaw a moral transformation of humanity led by reason and love. Indeed, how can this vision be realized in a world increasingly shaped by technology, materialism, and social polarization? I mean, this is a really complex question that was posed here. So thank you, whomever sent this question. But because humanity, the transformation is through reason and love, the very same vision is not going to be different. Technology today should be one of the most powerful tools that we have in our hands to disseminate Spiritism. As much as we see, for example, pages on Instagram or Facebook or LinkedIn or whatever it is that we follow, Twitter, TikTok, that are promoting so many things that get so many attention. I mean, I know this girl. She's a Spiritist. And I'm not going to say where she is or where she's from or whatever, but she grew in Spiritism. And she has a TikTok channel that has over 100,000 followers, but she doesn't disseminate Spiritism. So this is interesting. We have the power of the Spirit, as Paul would call it back then. Today, our power of the Spirit is technology. It is how we're going to utilize it to promote Spiritism so that it does touch other people through reason, through love, through its teachings, so that they too can transform themselves. Imagine this. Here I am sitting in my house, and I am not a Spiritist, and I have no idea about Spiritism whatsoever. but I am contemplating suicide because I still have very materialistic views of the world. And I just lost everything. I lost the love of my life. Because I lost the love of my life, I stopped working because I couldn't go to work, because I could not produce. Because I could not produce, I was fired. Because I was fired, I started losing money. Because I started losing money, I was kicked out of my home, my apartment, and I live in my car. Now I want to commit suicide. That's the only way out. I mean, if I don't believe in the afterlife, if I don't believe in the teachings that Spiritism bring, because I don't have access to it, I might as well end everything. Why suffer unnecessarily? If I am faced with a terminal illness and I would rather die with dignity. This is what they're calling euthanasia today, as if dying through the process that we're called upon to actually face the struggles that we actually are answering to based on the law of effect, either as a mission or a trial and an expiation. If I don't have knowledge of that, I might as well die with dignity, meaning I'm not going to suffer. I'm not going to pose any hardship on my loved ones. This is how people think. And although it is very noble, it is not the reality. When our loved ones are called upon to care for us, to look after us, they're also answering a very important call. Everybody that is in that situation have a reason to be there. But going back to me, I lost everything and I live out of my car. But I have a cell phone and my line yet has not been canceled, and I can browse through social media. Now, Mark, who is our beloved host with the most, is Spiritist, and he's doing a talk for the United States Spiritist Federation. And the topic that day is about suicide. These very wrong way out, let's say suicide, a wrong way out. And here I am. My spirit guide, my mentor, my guardian angel, however you want to hear, is guiding me, inspiring me to flop. And I stop and I listen. And how transformative it could be to have more and more Spiritist content so that more and more people, through this blessed tool of technology, could hear the message of eternal love. And all of a sudden, I start realizing that I have a worth that I forgot about, that I am a child of God, that suicide is an erroneous way to search for the solution, that there are other ways that I can seek to make a difference in my life. And so all of a sudden, Mark has just, not Mark, but the Spiritist content that Mark is disseminating has just saved another life. That's the very transformative tool of Spiritism, utilizing the power of technology, making a difference in the world. And we have the power to do that. We have the power to do that. But it's not necessary to just learn about Spiritism and just be good, be silent about things that matter. If we have this knowledge about why killing someone else, or why euthanasia, or about abortion, and I have this consoling way of disseminating it, then I would do that because I am empowered by the benevolent spirits to do so. So just to answer some of what was brought here, this vision through reason and love can be brought upon by Spiritism through this very powerful knowledge of Spiritism. I wanted to, as we go through the end of our presentation, bring a little story that is found on Chronicles and Letters. It's by the Brother X and Chico Xavier. It is not yet translated, if I'm not mistaken. It is Cartas y Crônicas, and it's a story that the Spirit narrates in such a way that he's going to say. It is said that Allan Kardec, while he was compiling the text that would give birth to the Spirit's book, he decided to go to bed one night, deeply moved by a dream that he had heard about that involved Luther. And the great reformer in his time, held the conviction that he had actually been in paradise, gathering information about celestial happiness. And Allan Kardec was very touched by that. And so he fell asleep. And during sleep, contemplating about that, he found himself out of his body, not completely detached, because otherwise it would be discarnation. But we roam freely when we are asleep. And so Allan Kardec found himself through this experience out of his body. And this remarkable out-of-body experience is what Brother X is going to call it. Beside him, he recognized the presence of a sublime messenger from the higher spheres of life. And this messenger, without saying anything, transported Allan Kardec not to the celestial places like Luther had the vision of, but rather a very foggy region, a very dark place where thousands of spirits groaned and made noises in horrifying suffering. And Allan Kardec would hear these spirits sobbing. There was a mixture of screaming of rage and blasphemies, also followed by mad laughter. I mean, envision this place. I don't know if you saw the movie Astro City, but really it's called No Solar, or even reading the beginning of the book in which André Louis finds himself in the umbral. This is actually worse. Allan Kardec was seeing worse. And stunned by that, I mean, imagine if you're Allan Kardec, he thought of maybe the tyrants of histories. And then he asked the presence that took him there, the very evolved spirit who took him there. And he said, are these those who crucified Christ? I mean, if we envision who could be the worst type of people going through suffering at that moment. And so he thought of those who crucified Christ, and he said that the good spirit said, no, none of them. They actually, although they were responsible for what happened to Christ, they didn't fully understand the evil that they were committing. The Master himself helped to free them from the remorse that attacked them when they were dead, granting them the blessed reincarnations through which they actually made amends with the divine laws. And so he thought, well, maybe the Roman emperors, surely those who imposed such suffering on humanity must endure the very same here. And the figure said, nope, not them at all. They had no understanding whatsoever of spirituality. Some of them, after regenerative stages on earth, actually have already risen to higher spheres, while others remain, even today, reincarnated in the physical world, close to redemption. So Allan Kardec said, well, then maybe the executioners of the early Christians, the persecutors of the Christians, maybe they are the ones that are imprisoned in these dark valleys. And the messenger said, nope, not at all. The persecutors of Jesus' followers during the apostolic days were actually nearly savage men and women, despite their outward appearance of civilization. All of them were directed toward reincarnation to gain education and understanding. They are not here. And so Allan Kardec, thinking about all of this, he thought of those conquerors of antiquity. He thought of Attila, he thought of Hannibal, he thought of Genghis Khan's. But before he could actually ask the question, the benevolent spirit heard his mental inquiry and answered, the warriors that you remembered do not wander here. They knew nothing of the spirit realities, and for that very same reason, they received merciful aid, and they were guided to physical rebirth, reincarnating, entering expiatory type of lives according to the debts that they incurred. So Allan Kardec, overwhelmed by the suffering he was hearing, said, please tell me, who are these sufferers? Who are these sufferers whose groans, whose suffering, whose mad laughter, whose tears are actually bringing me and my own soul to tear myself? And so the guide clarified. He said, these are those who lived in the world fully educated about the imperatives of goodness and truth. Yet deliberately turned away from truth and goodness, especially the unfaithful Christians of all eras, those who fully knew the teachings of Christ, the examples of Jesus, but those who willfully chose the negative, the evil, the bad inclinations. For them, a new opportunity to reincarnate on earth is always much more difficult. So here we are, maybe perhaps even us. We have knowledge of the teachings of Christ. We know about it, but we look at the world and we say, you know what? If I'm not contributing negatively, I'm already doing very good. I'm doing very well, right? Or why should I do good things if all I see in the world are the negative things that are happening? I can't make an impact. It's an ocean. It's an ocean. But it was Mother Teresa, if I'm not mistaken, who said that even a drop in the ocean can cause little tiny waves, right? So imagine 100, thousands, millions of drops in the oceans, the effect that it can have. But continuing, shocked by the observation, Allan Kardec returned almost immediately to his physical body. He woke up, and because of the dream that he had, that experience that he knew was very real, he got up, he went to his desk, and he wrote the question that would actually be in the Spirit's book, which was question 642. He asked the benevolent spirits, in order to be pleasing to God and to ensure our future situation, is it enough simply not to do what is evil? The benevolent spirits answered Allan Kardec, nah, all must do good to the best of their abilities, for all will answer for all the evil that has resulted from the good they left undone. It's interesting because I saw a situation back then of a teenager. She was 17 when this happened. I think it was in Florida, I'm not mistaken. We can send a reference later on. It just occurred to me. And she had a friend, and they would communicate via cell phone because he lived far away and she didn't really live close to him. And he suffered from depression. And he would tell her about his anguishes and his pain. He felt like he could trust her in telling her his utmost fears and his utmost painful thoughts. And she actually took pleasure from it. She would listen to that and she would encourage him to talk more, but because she felt pleasure hearing what he was saying. And so he started telling her about his desire to just commit suicide because the suffering was never ending. And she started encouraging him. She would encourage him to kill himself. One night, he tried to do it and he couldn't. And so she basically made fun of him, called him a coward, made him feel even worse than he felt already himself, saying that he wasn't even good enough to commit suicide. And so one day he had the courage and he said, I have an idea that will be less painful. And so he decided to close the garage and turn the gas on in the car. And he felt that he would die easily that way with the hose into the car with the windows closed. And so he proceeded to do that while talking to her. In the midst of it, he snapped out of it and he got out of the car. And when he got out of the car, she told him, she said, you go back in that car and you finish what you had started. And so he did, and he died. His mother couldn't understand. She knew that he suffered, but they were buddies, they were friends. Why didn't he reach out to speak to her? Why didn't he talk to her? And so for some reason, the authorities took his phone, took his information, and they started to study the content within his cell phone. And they found the communication between the two of them. And so they actually decided to reach out to the girl. Now, she had already deleted everything. And she basically said, I have no idea what you're talking about. But the police, as we know today, technology also allows even deleted things to be able to be brought back. And so they found the content in her phone. They took her phone. She was arrested. They had a warrant to investigate her phone. And she was arrested at that time because they felt that she contributed directly to his death. And so not only did they do that, they tried her as an adult, because after doing some work psychologically to find out if she had any insanity, if she had any mental illnesses that could not allow her to discern between right and wrong, they found that she could. And when she was 19, she was actually found guilty, and she got life without the possibility of parole. This is interesting because we see some of the laws in the United States and some states holding people accountable for things that are the outcome of other people's life, especially if they had a direct responsibility for the outcome. So here's the answer. I mean, the answer in the Spirit's book is very clear. They said, all must do good to the best of their abilities, for all will answer for all the evil that has resulted from the good they left undone. So if this girl, I mean, she's actually having an opportunity to start answering for the mistakes that she had, for having been found for life without the opportunity of parole, in thinking about what happened in prison. Now, of course, she's going to have to answer this, because we all do. But what if she had utilized her text messaging for the opposite, in telling him to talk to his mother, in telling him about that there was help, in trying to find out what was it that had her feel pleasure for the death of someone else? And this makes us think, when we read this question and we read the answer, we start considering, could we have a positive impact if we do good all the time, regardless of what others are doing? Let's say that I am watching somebody fight. As opposed to picking up my cell phone and recording because it's fun, what if I was able to approach somebody or call the police and try to break the fight that could eventually lead to someone else's death? These are all things that we start thinking about and considering, because we are in this world to grow and evolve, but we also have a responsibility. As in the gospel according to Spiritism, we're taught about duty. Duty is our responsibility, first with ourselves and immediately with our neighbors. Love your neighbors as yourself. This was one of the teachings by Christ. Spiritism is, symbolically speaking, in the words of Joanna de Angelis, Christ walking among us yet again, inviting us towards inner reform so that we don't fall into the deep abyss of suicide, depression, and everything else that can actually stall and keep us with our steps back, as opposed to marching forward towards it used the word redemption, but I'm going to use the word towards spiritual growth, closer ever more to Christ, who chose to be our shepherd. We are his flock. He would say that he would leave the 99 of part of his flock behind to go after the one that is lost, the one sheep that is lost. And oftentimes we are that one. Spiritism finds us. It's as if Christ is finding us. We find Spiritism, we grasp into it as if it's the lifeline that we've longed for so long, because symbolically speaking, floating in the ocean is easy, but when there are tempests and there are storms and the waves are high and it is raining, we need something that we can grab on, that can hold us high with our head above the water so we can breathe easier, so that when it's past, we can continue swimming onto shore. The shore, symbolically speaking, is the spirit realm. We can get there easier if we have something that will allow to guide our steps there. And Spiritism is that. This is why today we celebrate Allan Kardec. We celebrate Allan Kardec every October if we can. We should try to say a grateful prayer every time we finish the gospel at home, to find our prayer so that our prayer can find Allan Kardec wherever he may be, with the gratitude of our souls. Because Allan Kardec, when he received a letter with a copy of the Spirit's book saying, "This book saved my life, thank you, continue on your hard work." This is actually another beautiful story that can be told some other time. Spiritism for me saved me from many aspects in my life. And I am certain that if you're listening to this, perhaps you have your own experience that you can say on how Spiritism has also touched and changed your life for the better. On that, I'm going to call Mark, my host with the most, with gratitude for your patience and your time.
Wow, thank you so much, Andrea. Thank you for your presentation and so many different perspectives and historical realities of what was going on in France. That's just amazing. I want to invite everyone to please stay with us for the Q&A session right after I do some short announcements. We just had on September 20th, the 19th U.S. Spiritist Symposium. The theme this year was the evolution of consciousness. And all of the presentations, panels, and Q&A sessions are now available on the U.S. Spiritist Federation YouTube channel. So at your leisure, feel free to refresh on that information. Also like to tell you about a podcast-like series, The Psychology and Spirituality, A Bridge to a Better Life. This is based on the works by Joanna DeAngelis, and we have a new episode every Friday at 7 o'clock Eastern Time, and again, available on the YouTube channel as well as on Spotify. As Andrea knows, there is a new book release, The Spiritist Review, 1865, by Allan Kardec. And this is available at the website spiritistbooks.us. I'd also like to tell you about a great application for your phone. It's a free Spiritist app titled Be My Hope. It's available on both the Apple App Store and on Google Play, and it gives you an uplifting set of content, collection of videos, a daily message, and audio materials. And personally, I love getting the daily message. It's one of a series of things that automatically come to me through technology. Also, now available, 7 free, professionally recorded Spiritist audiobooks. These have been produced by the Spiritist Society of the Carolinas. And at your own pace, you can listen to Allan Kardec's foundational works on the YouTube channel for the Spiritist Society of Carolinas. On your screen right now, you should be seeing a QR code. If you grab your phone and take a picture, it will take you to the USSF donations page. And just so you know, your donations allow USF to produce things like this presentation, more publications, and promoting Spiritism globally, not just in the US. So please scan this QR code and make a donation. Okay, back to today's information presented by Andrea. We have a whole series of questions that have been submitted, and I'll start with one from USSF. And this is, again, for Andrea to answer. If Kardec's mission was spiritually planned, what does that imply about human free will versus divine providence in the accomplishments of universal tasks?
Wow, Andre Lewis. Wow, what a question. I wonder where he's from. I always see his name, and I always think of the spirit author, Andre Lewis. Well, what a question. I mean, if we consider Kardec's mission being spiritually planned, we also think about Christ, right? When Christ came There was also, if we read about on the way to the light, and how there was a meeting in the spirit plane about the formation of the globe, and then second about the coming of Christ. And we consider how human utilize their free will as well, even after all the teachings, right? And history developed itself and everything that went through. Divine providence will always work towards what is needed at that time, not only individually, but collectively as well. And although Allan Kardec's mission was appointed by divine providence, he came, he fulfilled, and now we have our free will to do with it as we wish, to have the type of transformations that we can do based on our spiritual maturity. So this is something that I believe could answer the question, the implication about human free will, which has to do with divine providence only really allowing certain things to happen, such as the coming of Christ or the coming of Spiritism, on our maturity and what we can do with the information, because nothing is lost. A lot of times we'll think that, it was a lost opportunity. In reality, it was a learning opportunity that many people will take it for their full advantage and go on towards the other world of regeneration, utilizing the time of transition, or those that simply opt to not make the most of it when they encounter it and they don't really want to do anything, and they're invited to do the year again, as we do in high school. Sometimes you have to repeat the courses so that you can go to the next grade in high school. The same applies to the human soul. And of course, I'm symbolically speaking here again. So I do believe that when we look at the accomplishments that are to be done, divine providence has a huge role in it, regardless of what we do with such a mission that comes forth. And whether we take full advantage of it or not, things do work in such a way to promote the progress, not only of humanity, but also our planet, as we see in the Spirit's book, and also the book Genesis, Miracles and Predictions According to Spiritism, in which time comes for the fulfillment of certain things. And we're talking about time coming into place to certain fulfillment of certain things. We're talking about divine providence. It comes to a point where we are going to evolve or not, but our planet is going to continue evolving, and humanity in it as well. So as we see in the book On the Way to the Light, something happened thousands of years ago that we're going to read about with Capella, those that were exiled from Capella. And this very same thing is happening now in history, where we are being invited to really own up with what we have available to us so that we can go forward in our planet regenerated, or we are going to be invited by Christ to go elsewhere, where we're going to continue to grow spiritually speaking, and we are going to assist others to evolve as well. And if you read the book On the Way to the Light, this is why some of the civilization in Egypt, for example, they thought about the lost paradise. I think it's Egypt. The aspect of the lost paradise, because subconsciously they remembered this beautiful place that they had, that they no longer belonged in. Let's consider this. Here we are. Technology is booming. We've got the iPhone 17. I don't, by the way. I'm okay with mine. You got the iPhones of the world. You've got all these beautiful cars that are coming, pretty soon, flying cars, whatever you think, things that you give importance to. It's comfortable. It's something that we are accustomed to. It's a different world that we're living in if you look at it 30, 40, 50 years ago. But if I don't hurry up and make up for time utilizing the information that I have to do the inner transformation, as it happened with the exiled of Capella back then, that were invited to go to another globe, another solar system, we are going to have the very same issue. We're going to go to a planet that is less evolved, and we are going to be like those that had this idea of the lost paradise. We are going to long for something that we can't understand what it is, but thankfully, some of the people in that civilization, they were able to make the work quick enough, and they were able to go back to the planet that they had come from. For this, we need to study about the plurality of the world, so that it doesn't sound like sci-fi, to understand what I'm talking about. Globes, different planets, different worlds. There is different hierarchy as well. We are in a world of trials and expiations, but we are being invited at this moment to make the most of it, so that we can inherit the earth, meaning we can go forward in this very same planet, because the planet is also evolving through the calamities, through the destructions. We also need to read the Spirit's book to understand this. As things transform, as they continue reforming, so do we, individually and collectively. So divine providence has its planning, has its work, and of course we are immersed in that, in this world, this ocean that is led by the divine laws. Regardless of whether we're making our part or not, divine providence is. So hopefully that answered. My husband can tell me, by a yes or no, because he's listening.
Wow. We have a number of questions, but we're running out of time. So I'm going to then just simply say, those questions are contained in the chat window. People can continue to read them and answer them accordingly, fill out questions and send them to USSF if you need to, or to Andreia. And Andreia, again, thank you. Heartfelt thanks to everyone who joined us for today's live talk, and to those who regularly follow our weekly Spiritist talk series.
Hey, Mark, sorry, just to interrupt you really quick, because it's a book, so I get, with the book, somebody asks Planetary in Transition, written by whom? Yes. It was by the Spirit author, Manuel Filomeno de Miranda, and the medium is Divaldo Franco. So just wanted to say that.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Next week, mediumship as a healing tool, presented by Anicio Resem. And I'll give Andreia one more opportunity for a final talk and a final prayer.
Just gratitude. Thank you so much for being with me also, Mark, as your host in this. And I also wanted to give a gratitude for the boys that are at the backstage doing this transmission. Thank you for the work that you do in the United States Spiritist Federation, for all the continuous work, and for you for watching as well. And I'm going to invite you to close your eyes if you wish to do so. Open your hearts. Let us open our hearts as we elevate our thoughts to our Master Jesus, in gratitude for the morning that we've had, for this opportunity of the present reincarnation with those that are immediately around us, the opportunities and experiences that we're having as immortal spirits, for allowing us to have in our hands this beautiful body of knowledge that guides, instructs, and enlightens us as we continue towards the path of always progressing, always evolving, learning more and more, so that we can ascend higher and higher to you, dear Jesus. Thank you for choosing us to be part of your flock, and bless our homes, the homes of those that are immediately connected to us. Bless any spirit that may be wandering outside of our homes, wandering without knowing where to go. May they see the light that shines bright as we pray and unite our thoughts and seek you in it, as we did so long ago. Thank you for being with us today and always, dear Jesus. Bless the United States Spiritist Federation and its efforts on disseminating Spiritism, and be with us always. So be it.